Myles Garrett didn't just win Defensive Player of the Year. He sent a message, and the entire NFL felt it. On a night designed to celebrate dominance, legacy, and individual greatness, Garrett had every reason to make the moment about himself. The cameras were locked in. The spotlight couldn't have been brighter. This was the peak of a season where he terrorized quarterbacks, wrecked game plans, and reminded the league why he's one of the most feared defenders in football. But instead of a long speech or a carefully crafted statement, Garrett did something far more powerful. He lifted his hand and flashed the sign. No explanation, no caption, no build-up. Just perfect time. If you caught it, you really caught it, because that wasn't random, that wasn't coincidence, and that definitely wasn't just a birthday shout-out. That was a public salute to Shedeur Sanders, delivered on the biggest individual stage of Garrett's career. And that's why this moment hit different. In a league where stars protect their own spotlight, Garrett chose to redirect it. In a sport driven by ego, contracts, and legacy debates, he paused his own celebration to lift up a young quarterback who's been under a microscope since the day he entered the league. Think about that for a second. A Defensive Player of the Year doesn't owe anyone a shout-out, especially not during that moment. And yet, Garrett made it clear, without saying a single word, exactly where he stands. This wasn't about social media clout. It wasn't about optics, and it definitely wasn't accidental. Because when a veteran leader like Myles Garrett sends a signal like that, it means something deeper is happening behind closed doors. Something built on trust, on belief, on seeing value in someone long before the rest of the league catches on. And here, where it gets interesting. Shedeur Sanders didn't walk into Cleveland under normal circumstances. He arrived carrying expectations, controversy, non-stop chatter, and a famous last name that magnified every move he made. For most rookies, that pressure cracks confidence. But Garrett saw something else. And that one silent gesture, on the biggest night of his career, might have just revealed everything about the future direction of the Browns. Because when your franchise cornerstone defender publicly rides for a quarterback like this, it's never just a gesture. It's a statement. Here, what most people missed. That perfect time hand sign wasn't just a birthday nod or a cool inside joke. It was a deliberate choice, and in the NFL, deliberate choices from leaders carry weight. Myles Garrett understands how moments work. He understands timing, optics, and message sending better than almost anyone in that locker room. And that's why this mattered. Because when Garrett threw up Shedeur Sanders' signature gesture on that stage, he wasn't just saying happy birthday. He was saying, I see you. He was saying, I believe in you. And most importantly, he was saying, you're one of us. That's not a small thing for a rookie quarterback, especially one who entered the league with as much noise surrounding him as Shedeur did. From draft day debates to non-stop media narratives, Shedeur has been dissected, doubted, and judged since before he took his first NFL snap. Every throw analyzed, every mistake amplified, every silence turned into speculation. Veterans don't usually step into that storm. But Garrett didn't hesitate. And that tells you this wasn't a surface-level relationship. This wasn't locker room small talk or PR-friendly support. This was something built over time, through practice, through film sessions, through conversations the cameras never see. Because here's the truth, NFL locker rooms don't run on tweets or interviews. They run on trust, and trust doesn't get handed out to rookies easily, especially quarterbacks. Garrett has seen enough football to know when someone's real. He's watched Shedeur handle pressure. He's watched how he responds after bad reps. He's watched how he carries himself when the room gets tense. And that's the stuff veterans care about. Not hype, not headlines, character. So when Myles Garrett chose to highlight Shedeur in his own defining moment, it quietly signaled something powerful to the rest of the league. This kid isn't just surviving in that locker room. He's being endorsed. And that endorsement, it changes how teammates listen, how coaches evaluate, and how opportunities start to open up. But that moment didn't come out of nowhere. Because long before the awards, the cameras, and the viral clips, Myles Garrett had already made his stance on Shedeur Sanders crystal clear. To understand how deep this goes, you have to rewind to the moment Shedeur Sanders first arrived in Cleveland. This wasn't a smooth, celebrated entrance. It was awkward, loud, and surrounded by doubt. Draft conversations were ugly. Rumors swirled. Analysts questioned everything, from his ceiling to his attitude to where he belonged. Some voices even floated the idea that Shedeur should slide far deeper than anyone expected. And when that chatter started gaining traction, most veterans stayed quiet. That's usually how it goes. Rookies fight their own battles. Veterans protect their own reputations. But Myles Garrett didn't follow that script. He stepped out early and publicly shut the noise down. Not with vague encouragement, not with safe, generic praise, but with a firm message that caught people off guard. Shedeur Sanders did not belong in that conversation, not as a project, not as an afterthought, and definitely not as someone to be overlooked. That mattered, because when the face of a franchise speaks up like that, it reframes the entire narrative. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't just media speculation anymore. It was veteran validation. Garrett didn't base that support on potential or pedigree. He based it on what he saw up close: the work ethic, the attitude, the way Shedeur carried himself when no one was watching, the consistency, the hunger. And that's where things shifted. Instead of waiting for Shedeur to earn respect over time, Garrett gave him something far more valuable right away: credibility inside the building. The kind that makes teammates pay attention. The kind that tells coaches, this kid is serious. It's rare to see a defensive superstar go out of his way to vouch for a rookie quarterback. Those relationships usually take seasons to form, but Garrett didn't wait. He didn't hedge. He didn't stay neutral. He chose a side. And by doing that, he quietly changed Shedeur's trajectory before it ever hit the field. But words are one thing. What Myles Garrett did after that, when things got uncomfortable, proved this wasn't just talk. It's one thing to show love when everything is smooth. It's another thing to stand up when things get tense. As the season unfolded, the situation around Shedeur Sanders didn't magically get easier. Opportunities were limited. Decisions were questioned. And at times, it felt like the rookie was being handled with extreme caution, maybe too much of it. That's when Myles Garrett took things a step further. He didn't just speak about Shedeur anymore. He started speaking for him. When frustration bubbled over inside the locker room, Garrett didn't hide it. He acknowledged it openly. Not in a way that threw anyone under the bus, but in a way that made one thing clear: the players felt it too. And more importantly, they believed in their quarterback. Garrett made it known that when Shedeur was given chances, he delivered. That when the moment called for composure, timing, and precision, Shedeur showed up. Quick decisions, accurate throws, calm presence, exactly what you want when the pressure's on. That public backing mattered more than people realize. Because once again, this wasn't coming from a coach protecting his scheme or a teammate trying to be polite. This was coming from the most dominant defensive player on the roster. A guy who knows what championship-level football looks like. A guy who sees quarterbacks every single day and knows the difference between potential and reality. Garrett didn't frame his support as hope. He framed it as expectation. He talked about how Shedeur handled the huddle, how he responded to adversity, how he stayed positive even when things didn't go his way. Those details don't show up in box scores, but they shape locker rooms. And then came the moments behind the scenes. Practice fields, extra reps, quiet conversations, laughter between drills, Teammates noticed Garrett intentionally keeping Shedeur loose, breaking tension, cracking jokes, making sure the weight of the moment didn't crush him. That's not accidental. That's leadership. Because when a young quarterback feels supported by the most powerful voice in the room, it changes how he walks in every day. It changes how he prepares. It changes how he believes. At that point, this wasn't just mentorship anymore. It was protection. And the timing of it couldn't have been more important, because what Myles Garrett saw in Shedeur Sanders was something the rest of the league was still sleeping on. Myles Garrett isn't impressed easily. He's faced elite quarterbacks. He's wrecked game plans. He knows the difference between someone who looks good on paper and someone who actually commands a football field. So when he talks about a quarterback's ability, it's not hype, it's evaluation. And when Garrett talks about Shedeur Sanders, he keeps coming back to the same things. Timing, accuracy, poise. Not flash, not headlines, the stuff that wins games in the fourth quarter. Garrett has pointed out how clean Shedeur's throws are, how the ball comes out on time, how receivers don't have to break stride. Those details matter, especially to a defense, because a quarterback who's decisive and accurate forces defenders to stay honest. It limits mistakes. It controls momentum. That's why Garrett believes Shedeur doesn't just help the offense, he helps the entire team. A calm, confident quarterback keeps the defense fresh, keeps games manageable, keeps chaos from spiraling, and Garrett has made it clear he sees those traits already showing up. But there's another layer to this that doesn't get talked about enough. Garrett respects how Shedeur handles pressure. Being Deion Sanders' son comes with non-stop noise, expectations, comparisons, criticism that has nothing to do with performance. Garrett knows that kind of spotlight can break players if they don't have the right mindset. Shedeur didn't flinch. According to Garrett, he showed up every day with the same energy, same focus, same hunger, no sulking, no entitlement, just work. That consistency is what sold him. Because talent can be coached, arm strength can be developed, but mentality, that's either there or it is. And Garrett believes Shedeur has it. That's why this relationship goes beyond a viral gesture or a birthday moment. Garrett isn't supporting Shedeur because it looks good. He's doing it because he sees a quarterback who can grow into something serious, something dangerous. And when a leader like Myles Garrett puts his stamp on a young player, it sends a message that travels far beyond the locker room. The rest of the league may still be catching up. But inside Cleveland, the picture is already clear. Sometimes it takes one small gesture to reveal something much bigger. That's exactly what happened when Myles Garrett flashed Shedeur Sanders. Signature, perfect time hand sign after winning Defensive Player of the Year. No speech, no explanation, no spotlight grab. Just a quiet, deliberate message. On the surface, it looked like a simple birthday shout-out, but to anyone paying attention, it was much more than that. Garrett chose that moment, his moment to acknowledge Shedeur, on the biggest stage, at the peak of personal achievement. That isn't coincidence. That's intent. In a league where moments are carefully curated and egos often dominate, Garrett made a different choice. He redirected attention. He showed alignment. He showed belief. And the reaction was instant. Fans picked up on it. Players noticed. Media outlets started asking questions. Because when the face of a franchise publicly ties himself to a young quarterback like that, it changes perception. It tells the locker room, this guy matters. It tells the coaching staff, this guy has backing. And it tells the league, pay attention. What made it even more powerful was how effortless it felt. Garrett didn't need to explain himself. The message landed without words. Respect recognizes respect. For Shedeur, that gesture wasn't just symbolic. It was affirmation. Proof that the work he's been putting in quietly, consistently, hasn't gone unnoticed by the one person who sees everything from the other side of the ball. And that's why this moment stuck. Because it wasn't about birthdays or awards. It was about trust. And trust like that doesn't come from hype. It comes from shared reps, shared pressure, and shared belief. But the real question now isn't why Myles Garrett supports Shedeur Sanders. It's what happens next, when belief turns into opportunity, and opportunity turns into responsibility. This is where the story stops being symbolic and starts becoming strategic. Because when a franchise-defining defender and a developing quarterback are aligned, everything changes. The culture shifts, the expectations rise, and accountability becomes real. Myles Garrett isn't just a leader by title, he's a standard setter. When he believes in someone, it raises the floor for everyone else. Teammates listen, coaches take notice, the locker room follows. That's the kind of backing young quarterbacks rarely get this early. For Shedeur Sanders, this bond creates a foundation most rookies don't have. Confidence without entitlement, support without pressure, freedom to grow without fear of being isolated. And Garrett understands exactly why that matters. He knows the league can chew up young quarterbacks. He's watched talented players lose confidence because the environment around them wasn't stable. He's seen how doubt spreads when leadership is fractured. That's why he's been intentional. From practice habits to public comments to quiet moments behind the scenes, Garrett has helped create a lane for Shedeur to develop the right way. Not rushed, not sheltered, just prepared. The scary part for the rest of the league. This kind of alignment doesn't usually happen by accident. It happens when veterans see something real. When they recognize a quarterback who can eventually carry weight, not just throw passes. And if Shedeur continues to grow into that role, this relationship becomes more than mentorship. It becomes partnership. Defense and offense moving with the same heartbeat, same urgency, same belief. That's how teams change trajectories. So while people are still debating draft positions and narratives, the Browns might already be building something more important, trust between leaders. And when trust is in place, everything else tends to follow. Which brings us to the bigger question. Is this just the beginning of Shedeur Sanders' rise, or the foundation of something Cleveland hasn't seen in a very long time? This isn't just a feel-good story, and it's definitely not just a viral moment. What Myles Garrett did matters because of who he is when he did it, and who he did it for. In a league driven by hierarchy, Garrett sits at the very top. He's not a fringe veteran. He's not a locker room cheerleader. He's the standard, the tone setter, the guy everyone listens to without question. So when that player publicly aligns himself with a young quarterback, it's never accidental. It's a signal. It tells the building that Shedeur Sanders isn't just another name on the depth chart. He's someone worth investing in, someone worth protecting, someone whose growth actually matters to the future of the team. And here's the part people keep missing. Garrett didn't do this during a random interview. He didn't do it when the cameras were asking about Shedeur. He did it at the peak of his own moment, after winning Defensive Player of the Year, when he could have made it all about himself. Instead, he chose connection. That says more than any quote ever could. Because leadership in the NFL isn't about speeches. It's about alignment. When the best defensive player believes in the quarterback, it creates stability. It creates patience. It creates a buffer against noise, doubt, and outside pressure. For Shedeur, that kind of backing is priceless. For Cleveland, it could be foundational. The league is obsessed with talent, but dynasties are built on trust, on shared belief, on leaders pulling in the same direction before results ever show up on the scoreboard. And whether people are ready to admit it or not, this moment feels like the start of something bigger. Not hype, not noise, not coincidence, just two leaders moving in sync. And sometimes that's how everything changes.